The CEO's reckoning. Two sons. One, inescapable truth, attention. Fans of forbidden love. If you believe that money can't buy happiness or silence the past, you must hit subscribe and smash the like button now. The consequences of this billionaire's betrayal are about to unfold. Dorian St. Clair, a man whose face was synonymous with global success, was about to have his impeccably crafted world shattered by two small, identical boys. 5 years ago, under the brutal pressure of his aristocratic London family, the tech magnate had coldly abandoned his wife, Clara Vance, a woman who represented everything genuine and messy he craved. Now, on a crowded stage in Dublin, she reappeared. Not alone, but with two 5-year-old twins whose piercing sapphire blue eyes and the confident slant of their gold blonde hair were an undeniable miniature reflection of his own. The world saw him as untouchable, but facing Clara and his twin sons, Dorian was forced to confront a truth more devastating than any corporate loss. The price of his ambition was his paternity. Dorian St. Clair, The Perfect Product. Part 1. At 32, Dorian St. Clair was the CEO of St. Clair Industries, a multi-billion-pound empire built on green energy and revolutionary AI. His profile graced Forbes covers, he delivered keynote addresses at Davos, and he moved through the world with the polished sheen of inherited and earned wealth. His image was always the same: perfectly tailored Savile Row suits, golden blonde hair swept back, and sharp, icy blue eyes that signaled cold, disciplined ambition. He lived in a minimalist penthouse overlooking the Thames, drove a custom electric Aston Martin, and for all outward appearances, was destined for untouchable greatness. Yet 5 years earlier, Dorian had almost jeopardized it all for one thing his family deemed irrelevant: love. His secret was Clara Vance. She wasn't an heiress or a venture capitalist. She was a graduate student from Dublin, studying sustainable architecture on scholarships and part-time jobs, with paint often staining her trousers and notebooks full of chaotic, inspired sketches. She had long chestnut hair, expressive eyes, and a way of looking at Dorian that made him feel like he was more than just his title. With her, he laughed louder, slept better, and imagined a future that didn't revolve around quarterly earnings. He pictured a simple life, a small wedding, a cozy home, and children with those same expressive blue eyes. They met at a gala he attended only out of obligation. She was setting up stage lighting, and he literally stumbled over her while checking his stock updates. It was the most human moment he'd had in months. Their relationship blossomed in private. Takeaways on her tiny balcony, late-night talks about dreams, and long, anonymous walks through London's parks. She mocked his expensive watch and fiercely refused to let him pay her rent. But the St. Clair dynasty had other plans. When his parents, the formidable Lord Julian St. Clair, chairman of the board and Dorian's coldest confidant, and Lady Helena St. Clair, learned of Clara, their reaction was immediate and brutal. "She is not of your caliber. She dilutes your brand," Lord Julian stated plainly in his mahogany-paneled office. "Marry her, and we begin the process of removing you from succession." Lady Helena didn't hide her disdain. "Do you truly wish to shame the family? What will the stakeholders think when they see you with someone so ordinary?" Dorian tried to fight. He argued that he didn't care about perception. But St. Clair Industries was more than a company. It was a 3-generation legacy. His name was the brand. His face was the investment. As the pressure mounted from his family, the board, the advisors, Dorian felt the walls close in. The worst part: he never told Clara the truth. One day, he simply ended it. No explanation, no argument. He said he needed to focus on his career and walked out of her small flat, leaving behind the woman he had pictured forever. Clara called once, then twice, then stopped. He never answered. He submerged himself in work, convincing himself it was necessary. But not a day passed without him thinking of her, missing her laugh, and feeling the deep, agonizing regret. Clara Vance, building cradles, not empires. Clara never believed in fairy tales, but falling in love with Dorian St. Clair felt perilously close to one. Then, one day, he was simply gone. A cold, carefully worded message about needing space to focus on his future. She waited, called, left a long, desperate voicemail, but the silence was definitive. She plunged into her architectural studies, trying to drown her heartbreak in blueprints and deadlines. But weeks later, she noticed the changes, the fatigue, the nausea, the delay. It was stress, she told herself. But when the test showed the word positive, her breath seized. The doctor confirmed her pregnancy, but the ultrasound revealed something she hadn't expected. 2 heartbeats. Twins. 2 vibrant lives growing inside her. 2 reminders of the man who had walked away without looking back. She considered calling him again, but remembered the silence. The cold response from his assistant. The realization hit her. He was not coming back. Clara decided to leave London. She found a job in a smaller firm in Dublin, a place where no one asked about her past. She rented a modest apartment and lived carefully. The twin pregnancy was brutal, but she was tougher. She worked through swollen feet, sleepless nights, and the crushing fear of being utterly alone. She gave birth to 2 healthy, beautiful boys, Caleb and Finn. They had the same startling gold blonde hair and the most intensely blue eyes she had ever seen. They were 2 small, perfect versions of the man she had loved. At first, it broke her heart to see him in their faces. But over time, that feeling softened into something fiercer. Love. Not for what could have been, but for what was. Her sons were everything. They were loud, messy, wild, and perfect. They were the reason she got out of bed when her body ached and her bank account hit 0. Clara never spoke Dorian's name. When the boys asked why they didn't have a daddy, she told them gently that sometimes people leave because they are afraid of love, and that it wasn't her or their fault. She focused all her energy on raising 2 curious and brave little boys who had no idea they carried a lineage that once governed a city. The inevitable collision. The forum. The invitation arrived unexpectedly. Architectural Futures Forum. Speaker selection. It was real. They wanted her to present her low-cost, sustainable women's shelter design on a major panel in Dublin. It was the recognition she had dreamed of. She hesitated for a moment. The cost of travel, the disruption. But then she said yes. She wouldn't let being a single mother stop her from professional advancement. She arrived in Dublin with Caleb and Finn in tow, 2 energetic 5-year-olds who chattered non-stop. She dressed them neatly in collared shirts and packed a bag full of crayons and snacks. She had no childcare. They would sit quietly near the back while she presented. The event was held in a sleek city skyscraper with glass walls overlooking the docks. She tried not to think about the possibility of running into anyone from her past. London was far away. He wouldn't be here. Why would he? Then she heard his voice. She was mid-sentence, answering a reporter's question, when the low, confident, and agonizingly familiar sound cut through the air. She froze. Her stomach twisted before her eyes confirmed it. Dorian St. Clair was less than 20 feet away, laughing softly with a group of sponsors in impeccable suits. He hadn't changed, only hardened at the edges. His relaxed expression was calm until his gaze landed on her. Clara watched the moment it hit him. First, confusion. Then, shock. Then, something deeper. His eyes flicked past her, towards the two small boys sitting quietly coloring on the carpet behind her table. Time slowed. Dorian's face went white. His gaze locked onto the twins, and Clara could see the gears turning in his mind, fast, desperate, undeniable. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. He walked towards her. She stiffened, clutching the edge of the display table. Everyone around them seemed to fade into background noise. The city, the forum, the years. Everything collapsed into this impossible moment. He stopped in front of her, his voice a barely audible rasp. "Clara." She didn't answer. He looked back at the boys, then back at her, visibly shaken. "Are they them?" She held his gaze. "Yes," she said, calm and level. "They're yours." He stumbled back, reeling. For a moment, he looked like a man who had just taken a punch to the gut. "I didn't know," he said. "I had no idea." "I know," she replied, her voice firm. "I tried, but you made sure I couldn't reach you." Dorian blinked, struggling to process. "But why didn't you try again?" Clara gave a soft, bitter, tired laugh. "I did. I left messages, sent letters. Your assistant told me never to call again. I assumed you had made your choice." Dorian lowered his gaze, the weight of comprehension settling heavily on his face. He looked back at the boys, who still didn't know who he was. Caleb looked up, smiled, and waved innocently. "I need to talk to you," Dorian said, his voice barely breaking. Clara crossed her arms. "Now you want to talk? After 5 years, at a public event?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I need to explain, and I need to understand." She stared at him, the pain she had buried deep surging to the surface, but she didn't let him see it. "Not here. Not yet. You don't just walk back in like nothing happened," she said. "But if you truly want to understand, start by learning their names." Dorian looked at her, and something fractured in his eyes. He turned to the boys, knelt down, and asked gently, "What are your names?" The twins looked at him, perplexed but curious. "I'm Caleb," one said. "I'm Finn," the other added. "What's your name?" Dorian smiled sadly. "I'm Dorian." They didn't recognize him. Why would they? Clara watched from behind the table, her heart pounding. This was not the moment she had prepared for. Yet here they were, not as strangers, not yet as a family. But something had started to change. The truth was finally out, and nothing would ever be the same. Interaction point. If you were Clara, what would be the single most difficult question you would ask Dorian about his choice to abandon you? Share your first reaction to Dorian's decision in the comments. The DNA test and the first steps. Part 2. Dorian didn't sleep that night. The image of the two boys, Caleb and Finn, persisted in his mind, haunting and vivid. Their names echoed like a mantra he never knew he needed. He could still see their eyes, so familiar it ached, and the way they had looked at him without recognition. They didn't know him. That realization shattered him. The next morning, he arranged a private DNA test. He told no one. It wasn't about legality. It was about getting permission to believe the truth, even though every part of him already knew. The results arrived 3 days later, 99.9% match. There was no denying it. He was their father. Dorian stared at the document for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer, like a sacred heavy relic. A door he had unwittingly locked himself out of 5 years ago. He contacted Clara through the event coordinator. She agreed to meet him, once, at a small, anonymous cafe near the Dublin docks. No lawyers, no assistants, just them. She arrived with her usual quiet strength, simply dressed, her hair pulled back. She looked tired, but serene. and more beautiful than he remembered. Life had carved new lines onto her face, adding a gravity that hadn't been there before. They sat opposite each other, two people with years of pain between them, forever connected by two children who didn't know it. "I got the results," Dorian said finally. "They're mine." Clara nodded. "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words that meant enough. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything you don't mean," she said, her eyes clear. "I mean it now, Clara. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about them." "I believe you," she said. "But that doesn't erase what happened." Dorian looked down, shame washing over him. "I wanted to fight for you. I was going to. But my parents, the board, it all came down on me. I didn't know how to be the man they expected, and the man you needed." "You chose them," she said, without malice. "You walked away." "Yes, and I had to raise them without you," she continued. "While you were building empires, I was building cots. While you were giving speeches, I was trying to scrape together enough for dinner." Dorian winced. Her words were not cruel, just true, and they hit harder than he could have anticipated. "I'm not asking for forgiveness yet," he said. "I just want a chance to know them, to be a part of their lives, however small. They're 5 years old. They don't understand betrayal or loyalty, but they understand presence," Clara said slowly. "You can't just drift in and out. You can't start and stop. If you want to be in their lives, it has to be until the end." "I'm in," he said, without hesitation, whatever the cost. She nodded, still cautious, but something in her posture softened. "Then you start small. Pick them up from school one day. Come to the park. Sit with them. Let them approach you. If they ask questions, answer honestly. If they run away, don't chase them. Just be there." Dorian nodded, humbled. "Okay, I can do that." Leaving the cafe, they parted without embraces or promises, only a fragile understanding. Clara walked ahead, and Dorian followed at a respectful distance. Not as a couple, not yet as a father, but as a man finally trying to correct what had once gone so terribly wrong. The Cost of Presence. Part 3. Dorian's first visit to the boys' school was nothing like the corporate events he was used to. He stood awkwardly by the school gate, dressed in a casual cashmere sweater and jeans, unsure where to put his hands. He'd signed off on billion-pound acquisitions without a sweat, but waiting to collect his sons who didn't even know they were his, made him feel like a nervous teenager. Clara had carefully set the stage. She told the boys that a friend would pick them up and take them to the park. No labels, just a chance to meet on neutral ground. When Caleb and Finn burst out of the school doors, Dorian recognized them instantly. Their blonde hair gleamed in the sunlight, and their identical blue eyes lit up when they saw him, though they didn't quite grasp who he was. He knelt down, unsure of the script. "Hi, I'm Dorian. Your mom asked me to take you to the park today. Is that okay?" The boys looked at each other, then back at him. Caleb tilted his head. "Are you the man from the tall building with all the suits?" Dorian smiled. Yes, that was me." Finn squinted. "Do you have snacks?" Dorian laughed. "Yes, loads." That was enough. They took his hands without hesitation, chattering about dinosaurs and spaceships. Dorian listened to everything, mostly just absorbing them. Their voices, their joy. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. At the park, they ran for the swings, and Dorian sat on a nearby bench, watching. For a few minutes, he allowed himself to pretend that this had always been his life. But that illusion cracked when Finn fell off the slide and bumped his elbow. Finn froze, eyes wide and glassy, trying to decide if the pain was worth the tears. Dorian ran instinctively, kneeling to gently check the small arm. "You're okay," he said softly. "No blood, just a little bump." Finn blinked. "You sound like Mum." Dorian paused, then said quietly, I'm trying to be good at this." Finn leaned into him for just a second, and that small gesture nearly broke Dorian in two. He looked up and saw Caleb standing nearby, watching him intently. There was something calculating in Caleb's gaze, not suspicion, but a quiet assessment. Caleb finally walked closer. "Are you coming back?" Dorian looked him in the eye, his voice firm. "Yes, I'm coming back." Caleb nodded once, satisfied. He then ran off, calling Finn to chase him. Dorian stayed there for a moment, catching his breath. That single question, "Are you coming back?" had felt heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. But his answer had been true. He would be back, again and again. The visits continued, quiet and consistent. Dorian showed up at school pickups, at the park, at classmate birthday parties he didn't know. He learned which juice boxes they hated, which superhero was currently in fashion, and how to separate them when they fought over a toy. He learned to kneel down and truly listen, to put his phone away, to simply be there. In time, the boys grew accustomed to him. They laughed more. They spoke his name with a little more familiarity. Caleb began to ask questions. "Did you know Mom when she was young? Do you live in a really big house? Why don't you have any kids?" Dorian answered honestly, carefully. One afternoon, as they walked back to Clara's flat, Finn took his hand without being asked. Caleb did the same, then looked up and asked, "Why do you always smile when you talk to us?" Dorian looked down at them both, their cheeks flushed from running, their matching backpacks bouncing. "Because I'm lucky," he said simply. "I get to be here with you." Clara waited at the door, arms crossed. She always watched him closely after every visit, as if measuring whether he had earned another. But this time, something shifted. She saw the boys rush inside, laughing, telling her about the swings. And then she looked at him. "You didn't leave today," she said softly. "You stayed even when Finn was scared. You stayed even when Caleb went quiet." Dorian nodded. "I told them I would." Clara looked down, then back up at him. "Keep doing that, just like that." Without grand gestures or emotional speeches, the wall between them lowered. It wasn't gone, but it had thinned. And Dorian knew this wasn't about being forgiven in one moment. It was about showing up in hundreds of them. And he would. Always. The name, Part 4. Dorian hadn't expected the word to come so soon. Nearly 3 months had passed since he started seeing Caleb and Finn regularly. He never missed a visit. He was never late. He had accepted that. For now, he was just Dorian, the man who brought good snacks, played tag without checking his phone, and laughed at their jokes. But one Saturday afternoon, something changed. Clara had an interview for a new design contract and asked Dorian to look after the boys for a few hours at his Dublin apartment, which he had quickly adapted with woven toy baskets, a small craft table, and a fridge full of juice boxes, and the kind of sugary cereal he definitely did not approve of, but bought because they loved it. They built an elaborate pillow fort between the sofas. Caleb declared himself captain. Finn insisted on being the science officer. Dorian played along as Commander Dad, a name Finn invented mid-game and said without thinking. Dorian froze for a second, startled by the word. He didn't respond immediately, afraid that if he reacted too strongly, Finn would take it back. So he just smiled and kept playing. But inside, he was a whirlwind. The word kept echoing in his mind. He hadn't earned it yet. Or maybe he had, little by little. Not through grand gestures, but through consistency, time, and quiet love. Later that evening, after dinner, and lying under the still-standing pillow, Fort watching a cartoon, Finn snuggled up next to him and looked up. "Can I call you Dad now, or do I have to wait?" Dorian felt his throat tighten. He looked at Finn's small, serious face, then at Caleb, who was also watching. clutching his favorite plush dinosaur. Dorian reached out and hugged them both. "You can call me whatever feels right," he said, his voice husky. "But if you want to call me Dad, I would be very proud of that." Finn nodded. Caleb gave him a small smile, the kind that says more than words. That night, Clara came to collect them. She found them asleep on the sofa, Finn resting on Dorian's chest. Caleb nestled beside him, both snoring softly. Dorian had fallen asleep too, his arm protectively around both, the TV still on low volume in the background. She didn't wake them immediately. She stood there for a long moment, just watching. Something deep inside her, something that had been locked away, began to move. She saw how safely Dorian held them in their sleep. When she finally woke him, Dorian slowly stirred. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "We must have all fallen asleep." Clara shook her head. They were happy. That's what matters. As she gently roused the boys, Dorian watched. "Finn called me Dad today," he said quietly. He asked if it was okay. Clara didn't speak immediately. Then she looked at him and said, "He wouldn't have asked if he didn't already feel it." The drive home was quiet. Dorian rode in the back seat with the children, holding their hands as they slept. Clara watched in the rearview mirror, and something inside her settled for the first time in a long time. The walls she had built to protect herself began to fall. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The final confrontation. Part 5. Dorian hadn't planned to confront his parents. He had avoided it for months, concentrating instead on showing up for Caleb and Finn, on earning Clara's cautious trust, on building something genuine from the pieces of the life he had once destroyed. But the silence stopped feeling like strength and started feeling like surrender. The more he embraced fatherhood, the more unbearable it became to know that his parents had stolen this from him. He needed to face them, not for closure, but for clarity. He arrived at the St. Clair estate in London on a crisp Sunday morning. Lord Julian received him in the library, sitting in the same leather chair where so many past conversations had been framed as sermons. Lady Helena appeared moments later, immaculate as always. "I'm surprised you came," his father said, crossing his hands. "We didn't think we would hear from you again." Dorian didn't sit. He stood near the fireplace, his posture quiet but unyielding. "We need to talk. About Clara. About the children." Lady Helena stiffened at the mention of her. "We warned you about her years ago." Dorian turned to her, his voice sharp but controlled. "You didn't warn me. You lied to me. You blocked letters. You ignored calls. You told people to keep her away from me." His father's eyes narrowed. "We did what was necessary to protect your future. You were emotional, unfocused. You would have thrown away your entire legacy for a girl who had nothing." Dorian took a deep breath, fury rising in his chest. "That girl is the mother of my children. Children you never even bothered to know existed. She raised them alone, with nothing. And they turned out better than anything this family has ever produced." Lady Helena stood up, her voice cutting. "Don't be dramatic. Do you think we haven't sacrificed for you? For this name? For your success?" "My success," Dorian interrupted. "It has nothing to do with this name anymore. The company, the image, the money. None of it matters if it costs me humanity. You tried to make me choose between love and legacy, and I listened. I walked away from the only real thing I had, but I will not make that mistake again." There was a heavy silence. His father leaned back, his tone suddenly colder, more strategic. "And now what? You'll play house with a woman and pretend you're a family man? Do you think the world will swallow that?" Dorian looked at him, disgusted. "I don't care what the world swallows. I care what Caleb and Finn see when they look at me. I care what kind of man I am when I tuck them into bed. And I care about the woman who carried that burden when I left. I am not here for your blessing," he finished. I am here to tell you your control ends now. If you cannot accept my family, you will not be a part of our lives. That is your choice. But I am done living under your version of success." They didn't respond immediately. There was a visible fracture in the illusion of power they had always held over him. For the first time, Dorian wasn't the boy seeking approval. He was the man drawing the line. "I pity you," he added softly. "You will never know them. You will never hear Caleb explain how he thinks the moon controls feelings, or see the way Finn draws his dreams. You will miss everything, and one day you will realize you traded your grandchildren for control." He turned and walked out, leaving them in their perfect, empty house. When he returned to his apartment, Clara and the boys were waiting. She looked up when he entered, reading his face instantly. "Did you tell them?" she asked. He nodded. "Everything." "And?" "They didn't take it well." Clara stepped closer. "Do you regret it?" Dorian looked at his sons, who were building block towers on the floor, their laughter echoing through the room. "Not for a second," he said. The Silent Power, Epilogue. The following night, after the boys were asleep, Clara handed Dorian a small, plain box. Inside was a photograph, one she had taken weeks earlier when he wasn't looking. He was sitting on the grass at the park, Finn in his lap. Caleb nestled beside him, all three laughing uproariously. She had printed and framed it. A silent gesture. A thank you. A beginning. Dorian held the photo for a long time before placing it on the shelf next to the children's art projects. He no longer needed validation from anyone but them. His family. His future. The life he chose, finally, on his own terms. A year passed. Dorian's mornings began with spilled cereal and the joyous chaos of getting 2 5-year-olds out the door. His nights ended with bedtime stories and small hands curled against his shirt. His London apartment had been transformed from a sleek bachelor pad to a warm, lived-in home where finger paintings covered the walls. Clara had softened too. She still had moments when the weight of their history made her pull back, but those moments were fewer now. They had rebuilt trust through shared responsibility and mutual care. One Saturday morning, as the boys played and Clara made coffee, Dorian stopped by the window with a small box in his hand. Inside was a delicate but strong ring. He walked into the kitchen and waited for her to look up. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing the seriousness on his face. "Nothing," he said. "That's the point." He took her hand and led her to the living room. He knelt down, and for a moment, everything faded into silence. "I don't want to rewrite the past," he said. "I just want to write the rest of the story with you, as your partner, as the father of our sons, as the man who finally understands what it means to love fully and show up completely." Clara smiled, a wide, genuine smile, and nodded. "Yes," she said simply, "because I don't need perfection. I just need you." The wedding came a few months later. It wasn't extravagant. They held it in the small community garden Clara had helped design years ago. Caleb and Finn, wearing matching waistcoats, carried the rings, too excited to walk slowly. As Clara walked toward him, her steps firm, her eyes locked on his, Dorian couldn't stop smiling. There were no grand speeches, just short, honest, unpolished vows. Promises to choose each other, not just on the good days, but on the difficult ones too. When they kissed, it wasn't the kind of kiss that marked a beginning. It was the kind that sealed something already built, slowly, painfully, beautifully. Standing barefoot in the garden with the love of his life beside him, and his sons chasing butterflies, Dorian finally understood what true success meant. He was home. Completely. Finally. And this time, he wasn't going anywhere. The beautiful conclusion. What does this slow, deliberate process of earning forgiveness tell you about true love? Share your final, heartfelt thoughts and any lingering questions for Dorian or Clara in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of redemption. Epilogue 2. The quiet threat and the unbreakable bond. Don't let the past sabotage the future. Hit subscribe and leave a comment. If Lord Julian tries to contact the twins, should Dorian and Clara let him? Share your advice. The unwavering rhythm. Life after the quiet wedding in the community garden didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. It settled into a rhythm far more valuable, a quiet, unwavering consistency. Dorian had fully embraced his new role. He moved his core operations from London to Dublin, delegating most corporate oversight to focus on innovation and, more importantly, school runs. St. Clair Industries continued to thrive, but its success was now a backdrop, not the main stage. Caleb and Finn, now 6, were inseparable forces of chaos and curiosity. They effortlessly switched between calling him Daddy when demanding a bedtime story and Dorian when trying to sound serious about a new Lego construction. Their bond with him was complete, built on thousands of small, present moments. Clara, now an equal partner in every sense, watched Dorian with a love that was mature, tested, and deeper than the initial burst of passion. She had reopened her small architectural firm, specializing in sustainable community projects, and her success was wholly her own. They were a team, no longer defined by the trauma of their past, but by the strength of their present choices. The echo of legacy 6 months after the wedding, an unexpected tremor reached their quiet life. It arrived in the form of a heavy, embossed envelope delivered to their Dublin address, bearing the official seal of the St. Clair family estate. Dorian opened it with a grim expression. Inside was a formal, chillingly impersonal letter from his father, Lord Julian St. Clair. Dorian, we acknowledge your decision to sever ties with the family and the firm's main board. However, it has been noted that the children, Caleb and Finn St. Clair, Lord Julian deliberately used his own surname, carry the St. Clair legacy. Regardless of your personal choices, the bloodline is paramount. We have established a substantial trust fund for their education and future. We expect to begin formal visitation arrangements immediately to ensure they are properly educated on their heritage. This is not a request, but an obligation to the name. Clara, reading the letter over his shoulder, felt the familiar cold knot of fear. Lord Julian wasn't trying to make peace. He was trying to reassert control through the one thing Dorian cared about: his sons. He is trying to buy their attention, Clara said, her voice low. Trying to introduce the legacy he forced you to choose over me. He's trying to remind me that I don't truly own my life, Dorian countered, crushing the letter in his fist. That my choices have consequences he can still manipulate. The unbreakable wall that evening, they sat the boys down. Not to discuss the letter, but to affirm their reality. Caleb, Finn, Dorian began, kneeling beside them as they ate their dinner. You two are the best part of my life, and your mom is the best part of both of yours. We chose to be a family, and we chose this life, this home, this city, this park down the road, because it makes us happy. Caleb, ever the rational one, looked up. Did the man from the very, very big house in London send you a boring letter, Daddy? Dorian smiled. Yes, he did. And he might try to contact you or your mom because he thinks he knows what's best. But only Mum and I know what's best for you. Do you understand? Finn, always the sensitive observer, leaned against Dorian's shoulder. We don't need a very, very big house. We have our pillow fort. Exactly, Clara said, her eyes shining with pride. We have the best fort in the world, and no one, no matter how big their house is, gets to decide who is in our fort. They decided together, as a unit. They would not accept the trust fund immediately. Avoiding any legal entanglement, that would give Lord Julian leverage. They would respond firmly through a lawyer, stating that any communication with the children must be approved and facilitated exclusively through their parents. The conflict wasn't over. It was a lingering threat, a quiet, persistent attempt from the past to infiltrate their future. But Dorian and Clara were no longer the people they once were. Dorian no longer feared his father's disapproval. He feared losing the beautiful, genuine life he had fought for. And Clara no longer feared being alone. She feared letting anything taint the happiness of her sons. The legacy they were building was not the St. Clair name, but the unshakable foundation of their family, built on presence, honesty, and a mutual promise. They would face every quiet threat, every temptation of the past, as one. What do you think is the next move for Lord Julian? Will he use legal means, or try a subtle emotional manipulation on the children? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next chapter in their courageous journey. Epilogue 3: The Legal Storm and the Boys' Response. Will money and power break their bond? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to see the St. Clairs fight for their freedom. The unwanted offer. Lord Julian St. Clair, a man accustomed to having his demands met with immediate compliance, was furious at the firm, but polite refusal from Clara and Dorian's lawyer. His immediate response was not to back down, but to escalate. True to his nature, he instructed his legal team to bypass the parents and file a motion with the Dublin courts, seeking grandparent visitation rights and officially naming Caleb and Finn in the public record as St. Clair heirs. The motion was a calculated act of aggression, a way to force Dorian back into the fold and put his private life under the relentless scrutiny of the elite London press. The news hit Dorian and Clara not through a formal document, but through a sensational headline in a major London tabloid that had somehow been tipped off. Billionaire tech CEO Dorian St. Clair's secret twin sons revealed in high-stakes custody battle over St. Clair fortune. Clara was devastated by the invasion of privacy. "He wants to destroy the quiet life we built. He wants to destroy me by using you and the boys," Dorian replied grimly. "But we are prepared. We chose our lawyer carefully. We fight this together." The Children's Council. They decided to tell Caleb and Finn about the legal battle gently, using the language of their world. "Boys," Dorian began one evening, sitting with them in their beloved pillow fort. "Remember the man with the very big house who sent the boring letter? Well, he wants to spend time with you, but he wants to do it on his terms, not ours. He thinks that because he has a big house and a famous last name, he gets to decide what's best." Caleb, ever the captain, frowned. "But he doesn't know the rules of our fort." "Exactly," Clara affirmed. "And the rules of our family are that we decide together. Your grandfather is trying to use courts and lawyers to force his way in. We need to tell the court what you want." Finn, clutching his plush dinosaur, looked at Dorian. "But you are our daddy. Why does he think he is?" The simple question was a powerful truth. Dorian pulled him close. "He thinks his money and his name make him a father. But you two taught me that love and presence are what make a father. He is my father, but I am your dad. We will tell the court that." The decision of the fort. The family's defense was built entirely around the boys' best interests and the strong, stable home Clara and Dorian had created. Their lawyer emphasized the children's emotional maturity and the potential trauma of forced visits into a cold, unfamiliar environment. But the most compelling evidence came from the boys themselves. During a supervised interview with a child psychologist appointed by the court, Caleb and Finn were asked about their family. "Who is your dad?" the psychologist asked. "Dorian!" they chorused instantly. "What is the most important thing your family does together?" Caleb thought for a moment. "We build the fort, and Dad lets us be captain. Finn added, "We are safe in the fort, and nobody can come in unless we vote." When asked about the St. Clair estate, Caleb said, "It's too quiet, and they don't have good snacks." The psychologist's final report was unequivocal. The children's primary attachment was to their parents, Dorian and Clara. St. Clair. The proposed visitation would likely cause significant distress and interrupt a stable, loving environment. A quiet victory. Lord Julian's motion for visitation was ultimately dismissed. The court ruled that the parents were acting in the children's best interest by protecting their privacy and emotional stability, and there was no evidence of alienation. The victory was quiet, achieved not with a boardroom coup or a headline, but with the simple, undeniable evidence of two little boys who knew exactly who their daddy was. After the ruling, Dorian and Clara hugged their lawyer. Outside, Dorian looked at Clara, then at the sky. "We won because of the fort." "We won because you showed up every single day, Dorian," Clara corrected, her hand finding his. "That is a legacy no fortune can ever buy." That night, they didn't celebrate with champagne or a fancy dinner. They celebrated in the living room, building the biggest, most elaborate fort yet, complete with a moat of blankets and a flag made from one of Dorian's old cashmere sweaters. As Dorian sat there, watching his sons laugh, he knew this was the only kind of empire he ever needed to build. What do you think Lord Julian will try next to reclaim his legacy? Will he finally accept defeat? Share your reactions to the boys' powerful testimony in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the final, heartwarming chapter of the St. Clair family saga.